Well, hello, everyone. Here we are on the webinar where we're going to discuss a new cutting-edge supplement called Telostep. And tonight we're here with the founders and developers of this amazing supplement, Rex Hodge and Roger Green. So I'm going to give the stage right to the gentleman, and we'll take it off from here. Okay?
Good evening, everybody. My name's Roger Green. I'm the director of the Academy Healing Nutrition, which is a 30-year curriculum. We've been teaching natural healing and what we refer to as the longevity diet for over 30 years. And it's a curriculum that's essentially a blending of East and West themes and, you know, modern and traditional. And it's practical cooking classes and all sorts of fun. And we cover things like tonic herbs and superfoods and the longevity diet. So I've been involved with anti-aging and, you know, longevity science and energetics from both the East and West perspectives for some time, for quite a few decades now. I'm 180, so something's working here. So I'm very excited about tonight's presentation because this particular supplement it's out of the normal. It's incredibly special, and it involves the whole new science around telomeres. So we've got a very exciting presentation with Rex Hodge lined up for you. Rex is going to cover all sorts of interesting information about the history of telomeres, how it's discovered, how it's used, recent developments, and all sorts of things. Towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to go through some resources, like how you can get your telomeres measured. We're going to discuss a little bit more further about some of the other things that you can do for health and longevity. And I'm also going to mention our Super April sale on the product, because we really are offering an amazing deal to get everybody started. So I met Rex many moons ago. He's been my mentor. He really has been the brains behind the development of the Telostep. Incredible background in the scientific industry. So I'm going to hand it over to Rex. Okay.
If you just bear with me for a moment, I'll pull up the presentation and we can go through this whole field, exciting field of telomeres here. Just bear with me just a second. There we go. Bear with me just a second here. I seem to have the, there we go. Okay. As Roger just said, we're just now launching this exciting product called Telostep. And what Telostep is all about is telomere loss and trying to recover from telomere loss. Telomere loss is often called by people the body's natural aging clock, because more than any other mechanism in the body, it really works with clock-like precision, driving you to be older and older and further along in the aging process. And what cycloestrogenol does is it reverses that process, as we'll talk about in detail in this presentation. And the interesting thing about this is that you may see other supplements out there advertised as being anti-aging in some fashion or another, but usually they affect one particular body part or one particular specific thing. But what reversing telomere loss does for you is it helps to reverse the aging process throughout your entire body. Every organ, your skin, your brain, everything is made out of cells. And what we are doing is going down to the basic foundation of aging and reversing that in every single cell in your body. And one of the special things about this particular product is that in the past, when cyclooxygenol was first discovered, the problem was it was just way too expensive. And I'll explain in a minute why. But that high cost kept it out of people's hands. And what we've done with the Telostep product is we have protected the main ingredient, the cyclooxygenol, which you can see the molecule kind of pictured there on the screen. We protect it from degradation from gastric acid in your stomach. Because normally, if you were to eat that ingredient, your stomach would digest it into smaller molecules and it wouldn't be available to you. And so you have to take a much higher quantity of it in order to get a dose to your cells. And we have reversed that by protecting it from the stomach in your acid, releasing it in your intestines so that it can go, so that all of the ingredient that you take gets into your body. And that lowers the cost because you don't have to take as much. So specifically, you would have to take almost 1,000 pounds of the astragalus root, which is where cyclooxygenol comes from. It's not a man-made chemical. It's an ingredient that occurs naturally within the root of the astragalus plant. And the astragalus plant has been used for 1,000 years by Chinese medicine. It's one of the staples of Chinese medicine. And it may be one of the reasons why it has had some healing properties in the past. But the problem with cyclooxygenol, you can't just take astragalus root because it would take almost 1,000 pounds. It would be almost physically impossible to eat 1,000 pounds of astragalus root during the course of a year for one person because it's kind of a woody root. Plus, it's just not practical. But unfortunately, we have to distill it down about 10,000 times in order to get this ingredient out. And that's very high processing costs. And so that's why it's so expensive. And that's why with this gastric acid protection, we're able to get it down to something that you can afford, but otherwise it would be just too expensive to use. So now I'd like to get into the story from the beginning so that it makes sense to you. Mm-hmm. In the early 1960s, Leonard Hayflick was working in his lab, and he was looking at cells under the microscope, and he came up with this discovery that cells didn't just divide forever, even if you give them all the nutrients that they need and so forth. They will only divide so many times and then stop. And that number is somewhere between 30 and 90 times, depending on the cell and the condition. On average, it's about 60, 70 times. And then they stop. And he didn't know why, but he knew this was happening, and that's called the Hayflick limit. And the reason why I mentioned his name is that you'll hear the phrase Hayflick limit so much if you look into this field of cells stopping dividing and their role with aging. And it turns out that later people who were investigating DNA were able to figure out what the mechanism was that caused this. Imagine, if you will, if you had a document that you were photocopying, and you stuck this document on your photocopier and you push the button, and the photocopier was an imperfect photocopier. It was not able to photocopy a strip 1 inch on the bottom of the page. And so you would get your new document with this 1 inch strip missing that was white on the bottom. And then if you went and photocopied the copy, you lost another inch of the document. And then you lost another inch of the document on the next copy. And this is exactly the problem that the system that our cells have for replicating our DNA has the same sort of problem. It's an imperfect photocopier. And so it leaves off a little bit of the DNA every time it tries to copy it. This is just a result of the specific mechanism the cell uses to copy DNA. Now, every time your cell divides, you have to copy the DNA, because when one cell becomes two cells, each cell needs to copy the DNA to work. And so you have this problem. And so the way our cells handle that problem is that on the ends of our DNA, we have something called telomeres, which act as a buffer. Now, your DNA is formed of these, it's one big molecule. It's formed of these little submolecules that are like letters. We refer to them as letters because they spell out the code of your DNA. And a computer chip is a base 2 system with zeros and ones. Our computer's software is all zeros and ones. But DNA is 4. It has the letters T, A, G, and C. And so what your telomeres are is they're composed of these same submolecules, these same letters that the rest of your DNA is made out of. But the telomeres are just the letters T, T, A, G, 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 repeated time after time after time, which I call tag. So you have tag, 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 tag. That's all the telomeres say, which is complete nonsense, and it doesn't code for anything. It doesn't do anything in your body. The entire purpose of these extra letters being there is to be subtracted, to be that 1-inch strip of a piece of paper that doesn't get photocopied. And so you're born with a certain amount of telomeres, a certain amount of these tag repeats. And throughout the course of your life, more and more of them go away until finally you would endanger the coding part of your DNA, the part of your DNA that actually spells out how to build proteins and enzymes and how to conduct the business of the body. Because the DNA is your instruction manual. It's your software that runs the hardware of your body. And so that coding is very precious. And so the cell knows that, and the cell knows it would be in trouble if it had an imperfect copy of the DNA. And so the cell mechanism refuses to divide. The mechanism that controls cell division refuses to work if your telomeres get too short. And so that's what the Hayflick limit is all about. As soon as your telomeres get too short, cell division stops. And that's one of the main causes of aging. And the reason for that is that as you go through your life, everything you do is hard on your cells. You can have an injury that obviously kills a certain number of cells, but even just living kills a certain number of cells every day. And any disease or anything that happens to a part of your body will kill more cells. And so you have to constantly replace those cells. And if you have too many cells lost in a given organ, then that organ won't function properly, because your organ is nothing except your cells and your extracellular matrix, which is like a little spider web we weave to hold our bodies together. And that's all your body is throughout your entire body. Everything is done by cells. And so if your liver doesn't have enough of the right type of cell, it can't make the enzymes it's supposed to make to do its function. So in the 1970s, Elizabeth Blackburn discovered an enzyme called telomerase. And in 2009, she won the Nobel Prize for that discovery. The telomerase is an enzyme. And what the telomerase enzyme does is it makes telomeres. And it makes them right there on the ends of your DNA. So it builds back up the telomeres that you lost. And if it wasn't for the telomerase enzyme, there would be no second generation or third generation or fourth generation of human beings, because we would all run out of telomeres, cell division would stop, and all life would cease. So the telomerase enzyme is the thing that builds back those telomeres. And it's most produced in embryos and children, but by the time we've become adults, that whole process is shut down, and we're no longer making the telomerase enzyme, and that's why we have this particular problem. So back in the days of early civilization, and prior to that, humans only lived 35 years, and so it wasn't much of a problem, this whole telomere issue. But now that we're living over twice that long, now we run into the problem that we're running low on our telomeres, and we would really like to turn that enzyme back on and build our telomeres back up so we can turn back on cell division. And this is exactly what happens for lobsters, clams, sea urchins, they have their telomerase turned on throughout their entire life. And so they live hundreds of years. A lobster, just left out on its own with no one fishing for it, will live for 200 years. And that is very unusual for such a small creature. Usually smaller creatures have short lifespans. But because their telomerase is turned on all the time, they just keep going and going and going because they can repair the damage that life does to their cells. And this whole field that we're talking about, you know, the mechanism in which cycloestrogenol works is something called epigenetics. And I'm sure epigenetics is a word that people have heard. There are two components to DNA in terms of the DNA, how the DNA works in our cells. One is, like I described before, these letters that program out the software of the body, the instruction manual. They say exactly how to make different proteins and enzymes that the body needs to do various things. That's the basic coding of the DNA. But that coding can be turned on and off. And when you turn on and off those various codes for those proteins and enzymes, that's called epigenetics. And epi means around or above. It's like a Greek word. And the reason why it's called around or above is the way epigenetics works is you physically have things blocking the cell's access to a particular gene. And there's different ways that can happen. In the case of the gene that programs for the telomerase enzyme, the way that happens is there's a molecule that actually gets stuck to the DNA. It bonds there right over the top of the specific gene that programs for the telomerase enzyme. And we tend to, in any given cell, you tend to have that particular gene blocked somewhere in your childhood or adolescence. It varies depending on the specific cell as to when that will occur. But at some point, a particular molecule will bond on top of that gene. And once it does, you have now closed off access to that gene and the telomerase enzyme is no longer produced. So the interesting thing about the cycloestrogenol molecule is it fits like a key in a lock in between this particular molecule and the DNA. And so it pops off the molecule that is covering the gene. This allows the gene to have access to the cell. And automatically, it will start producing the telomerase enzyme. Unfortunately, that another molecule will come by later, maybe a day later, maybe a week later, maybe a month later, and bond over the top of that gene site again, shutting off the telomerase enzyme. And that's why we have to keep taking cycloestrogenol. We can't just take it once. We have to keep taking it because these molecules will keep coming back and epigenetically switching off the gene that we want turned on. So we keep taking it, we keep popping it off, we keep the telomerase flowing, and that will slowly build back up our telomere length. And I'll get later in the presentation, I'll talk about exactly how long that takes. So that's the mechanism that's involved. It's very, I find it to be very fascinating because the more we learn about the body, the more the body is kind of like a computer-controlled robot, just so much more sophisticated than anything mankind has ever developed, just incredibly sophisticated. But it works in a more sophisticated way than anyone might imagine. But if we can understand that process and understand it very thoroughly, then we can take a step like this and turn that epigenetic switch back on and produce the enzyme and have that beneficial result. So exactly this was done in a Harvard mouse study in 2010. Harvard and two cancer research institutes got together and they took mice that were genetically edited to be the equivalent of an 80-year-old human. In other words, they were elder mice. And they took these mice, and for 30 days, they turned on the telomerase enzyme. And because they were doing this with a genetic edit, they did it much more forcefully than we would do with the cycloestradiol. So it was really kind of a heavy-handed approach. But it was an amazing result. What they found is that every single organ in their body grew to a more youthful size and a more youthful function. Every single organ in their body, which includes your skin and their hair and so on and so forth, but also liver, spleen, intestines, everything. The most amazing thing was the brain, because the brain is known to be the least regenerative organ in the body. But it went from a 75% of youthful size back up to 100% of youthful size, which is completely amazing. And they also saw in cognitive testing that they got the mice, had a correspondingly higher mental function. Just an amazing study, totally blew everyone away. The biggest criticism of it was that they used genetically aged mice, not naturally aged mice. So naturally, someone did a study using naturally aged mice. And this was done by the Spanish National Center Cancer Research Institute, and it was headed by Maria Blasco, whose name will appear later on in the presentation as well. And she took naturally aged mice, she did a similar sort of experiment, and she had a similar sort of result. And because she was using naturally aged mice, she was able to determine the lifespan of these mice. And they were 12 to 24% longer in lifespan than the control mice. And also, because she was working at the Spanish National Cancer Research Institute, she was very interested in the cancer effects, because one of the things that everybody worries about when you talk about cell division is cancer is all about cell division. Is this going to cause cancer? And what she found was that the cancer rates were the same or less with the mice that received the telomerase than with the mice that did not. And once again, she used a very strong and more of a blunt instrument kind of approach. So she had more telomerase than we would produce, and she still had no cancer effect. So that was a very important study. And that was done in 2012. And a number of studies have been done since then. And a number of studies actually have been done before then as well, in terms of the links between telomere length and disease or lifespan. And many different kinds of studies, hundreds and hundreds of studies actually done throughout the medical community, looking at telomere length and lifespan or disease. And what they've all found is that the shorter your telomeres are, the shorter your lifespan is likely to be. And the shorter your telomeres are, the more likely you are to have any kind of disease, and the more severe it's likely to be. Now, the weakness of all of those studies is that there's always this issue of correlation versus causation. And so a very important study in 2013 done in the UK found, looking at 48,000 people, they were able to determine that shorter telomeres cause higher rates of cancer, MS, celiac disease, and heart disease, and that it wasn't just correlation. And that's very important, because if you fix the telomere problem, then you want to make sure that it's not just a detail of some study that there may be a benefit, but that there may actually be a benefit. And that's what the UK study hinted at by showing causation. There's one other kind of science issue that comes up here, and this has to do with senescent cells. One of the major causes of aging is senescent cells. And when your telomeres slowly run down and eventually get to the point where cell division stops, there are three things that can happen when cell division stops. What is supposed to happen, if everything works right, is a process called apoptosis. And what that means is that basically the cell says, hey, things are not going right. There is a good possibility that me as a cell might hurt the body because things aren't going right. And so I'm going to commit suicide as a cell sacrifice myself so that the body in general can be in a better condition. That's what cells are supposed to do when they run out of telomerase, when they run out of telomeres. If they don't do that, if things don't go right, some machinery is broken, then the cell could end up in a zombie-like state called senescence. And in a senescent state, the cell does most things right, but does a lot of things wrong. And a good part of what it does wrong is it sends out signaling molecules at inappropriate times, telling the cells in its surrounding neighborhood to do things that are random and it's not appropriate for them to do at that point in time. And so this leads to dysfunction. So the more senescent cells you have, the more dysfunction you have throughout your body. Things just don't work right. That part of aging is caused by senescent cells. Now, another way that a cell can go when it runs out of telomeres is it can go cancerous. And it will go cancerous if there's so much damage within the cell that the cell can't even remotely do the functions it's normally supposed to do. It can't even maintain its form. Then it goes cancerous and you have a really dangerous situation on your hands. So one way to prevent those things from happening is to not let the telomeres get to be too short. Keep the telomeres long. I call this the danger zone. You know, when you get close to cell division no longer occurring and it's senescence and cancerous, you're in the danger zone. So what you want to do is build up those telomeres and get away from the danger zone. Now, I should say there are other ways for a cell to go senescent or cancerous other than running out of telomeres. But almost all the time when a cell goes senescent, it is because it ran out of telomeres. It rarely uses the other mechanisms. With cancer, it's a matter of what kind of damage a cell sustains. And it's certainly possible to have a cell sustain some kind of damage that's so bad due to some event, toxic chemical or something, it'll go cancerous even when it has enough telomeres. But usually what happens, more times than not, a cancerous cell will go cancerous when it runs out of telomeres. Not because it ran out of telomeres as the cause of the cancer, but the trigger is the running out of telomeres, and the cause is the other damage done to, say, the DNA or what have you within the cancer cell. So, but anyway, it helps. And people speculate that this is why we're not seeing the higher cancer rates in the cells with the telomerase, is because the telomerase is actually keeping you away from that danger zone. And I should mention that one of the biggest dysfunctions that happens due to senescent cells sending out the wrong signals is inflammation. Inflammation becomes chronic throughout the body as you age, and one of the main drivers for that is your senescent cells putting out these messages. Inflammation is useful if you have an injury. It's part of the healing process. But these senescent cells, at an inappropriate time when you don't have an injury, can just put out this message calling for inflammation. And that, in turn, can lead to things like Alzheimer's disease and arthritis and so many other issues associated with inflammation. So the senescent cells just make those matters worse. So then a whole variety of tests have been done with cyclooxygenol. And those tests started with cells, human cells in the lab, done at Whittier College and UCLA and other places. And what they found was that when you give these cells the cyclooxygenol, it does produce the telomerase enzyme, whereas it did not before. And the telomeres get longer. And most importantly, the cells exceed the Hayflick limit. They actually do divide as they're supposed to, well beyond the Hayflick limit. Maria Blasco, who we talked about earlier, tested cyclooxygenol in mice, and she found that the telomerase was produced, that the telomeres were lengthened, and very importantly, she found that there were fewer senescent cells in the mice with the cyclooxygenol and no higher levels of cancer. So it did both of those things that I was just talking about earlier in her mice. They also, again, because of the whole cancer cell division issue, various people have bathed cells in huge concentrations of cycloestrogenol, cancer cells specifically, and it has not changed the behavior of the cancer cells at all to be bathed in these absolutely astronomical levels of cycloestrogenol. And studies with humans have shown that the first thing that happens when you take cycloestrogenol is not that it raises the average telomere length, which it does do, but the first thing that happens is it decreases the percentage of telomeres under 3,000 base pairs. And that's a very complicated way to say that it more rapidly increases the length of short telomeres than it does long telomeres. And the reason for this is that there's a mechanism within the cell that uses the telomerase enzyme to increase the length of the telomere in the cell. And that mechanism gets to decide whether or not the enzyme is used. It's a controlled function. We're not just going in there and making more telomeres randomly. We're making the ingredient, the material, the building material, or the tool may be a better way of saying it. We're making the tool that the cell's mechanisms itself can use to make more telomeres if they choose to. And if the telomeres are short, then they'll choose to. But if the telomeres are long, then they're less likely to choose to. And so in the data, you can see that those shorter telomeres get longer, and the average only slowly gets longer, which it does get longer, but only slowly because the average is composed of both the short and the long telomeres. A 2013 study was done with, I think it was 30 adult humans, and they looked at the sort of bottom line typical measurements of aging, things like blood pressure, cholesterol, insulin levels. And over a 2.5-year period, every single participant in the study had every single one of these numbers improve, which is pretty amazing considering that obviously over a 2.5-year period, most people would have these numbers get worse. So that's like an indirect way or a bottom line way of saying, yes, hey, these people had a better situation. So if we back off from the numbers a little bit and just look at what do people experience when they take cycloestrogenol? As I mentioned earlier, this is a whole body thing because your whole body is made out of cells. And so what we find is that people take what you see on the screen, people experience what you see on the screen there. What you see on the screen there are so many different things that affect so many different parts of your body that all have to do with the aging process. And in the individual people, I've never found a single person who has experienced everything on that list. What happens is that an individual person will experience different things on the list depending on their life experience. In your life experience, not only do you have your genetic background that may make you susceptible to different things, but you've had different illnesses, different injuries, different things that have happened to you in your life. And some of those things may be harder on one part of your body than another part of your body. And so you may be telomere limited in certain areas and not telomere limited in other areas. And so in those telomere limited areas, that's where you're going to see the benefit as an individual. In my particular case, I went to too many rock concerts in high school and college, and I didn't even realize it, but I had reduced the quality of my hearing, especially for the higher pitch noises. Those are the high energy noises. And so it's easier to damage your hearing in the higher pitch range. And I found that when I listened to music that I had been listening to ever since high school, or especially songs that maybe I listened to that didn't come out until after college, I might hear some instruments that I didn't even know were on a song because I could now hear them better. And I had no idea that I had this dysfunction until I started taking the cycloestrogenol, and that improved. And I have heard similar stories from other people involving everything that you see on that paragraph there on the screen, that different people have had their own little issues. And for each person, it's really kind of a special thing. The things involving vision and hearing are really easy to pick up on because it's obvious when you experience an improvement there. Some of the other things are less obvious and slower, like if you have more flexibility or less pain or something like that. You know, that's involving a lot of cells. And what I like to say is that cyclooxygenol, it's like healing a wound that is the size of your whole body. And if you're trying to heal a wound that is that large, it takes a while. So with the vision and the hearing, that might happen fast, but some of these other things, you have to be patient. And you also have to realize that you really have to pay attention to see the difference because it's gradual. And I've run into some people who have sort of comically had this big improvement that's pretty obvious to everyone to see, but they haven't noticed it themselves because it happened over a period of time. So you have to pay attention to what's going on, especially the flexibility and things that are the bigger items in terms of the number of cells involved, and therefore the time it takes. But I've talked to so many people who have such positive things to say about this. It's really amazing. And on the next slide, you'll see almost exactly the same paragraph, because in this slide, what we've done is this is actually the Telostep product, where we have taken cyclooxygenol and we have protected it from gastric acid, and we have given it to people, and they have reported back their experiences, and they seem to have exactly the same experiences, even though they've taken less of the ingredient, because we're getting more of the ingredient to their cells because we're not having the degradation due to stomach acid. So we had a group of people, we had them all take it. They were in ages between, for this particular group, in their late 40s to early 90s. So we had a wide spectrum of people of different ages, and they all reported, every single one of them reported something, multiple things actually. So as far as the gastric acid protection goes, in addition to people having the same experience with it, even though they had less ingredients, we also looked at the omega-3 molecule. And the omega-3 molecule has some chemical bonds that are very similar to some of the chemical bonds in the telomeres, or excuse me, in cyclooxygenol. And there was a blood study that was done with the same method to protect omega-3 from the stomach acid. And they found 3 to 10 times more of the active ingredient, the omega-3, in the bloodstream with the gastric protection versus without the gastric protection. Getting to the bigger studies, there are 2 studies. Unfortunately, the biggest one we can't really talk about yet because it has not concluded, it's not been published yet, but there are 1,000 people in a double-blind study that are taking cyclooxygenol to determine the difference in lifespan and also your body's ability to bounce back after injury, which they're measuring in the form of the number of days you stay in the hospital after injury or illness or surgery. So that study is ongoing. But in the meantime, we have had completed, and we can show you the results of a 97-person double-blind placebo test that was done over a 12-month period. And here are the results. And I'd like to remind you that when an infant is born, when you're born into this world, you have roughly 15,000 telomere base pairs. Okay, that's a base pair is a letter, a T or an A or G. And so you have 15,000 of them when you're born. And when you get below 3,000, that's kind of a warning sign. You're not yet in trouble, but you're getting into the danger zone. You're approaching it. Around 1,500 base pairs, your cell's just going to shut down and stop cell division. So it's important to realize sort of the magnitude of that. So in this particular study, over a 12-month period, the control group lost 290 base pairs on average of the telomeres. The group taking the cycloelastogenol compared to the control group was 533 base pairs higher. So what that's basically saying is that every year that you take cycloelastogenol, you're going to be 500 base pairs better than you otherwise would, and your base pairs are going to grow instead of be lost.
That's an absolute remarkable result, isn't it, Rex? That trial of the 97 people.
Yes, it's a very excellent result. It shows that, you know, here throughout the presentation, I showed you kind of like a very logical progression of what is going on within the cell that's driving one of the major causes of aging, and how this particular ingredient is able to, admittedly slowly, take you out of the danger zone and into a safer and safer place with time, the longer you take it. I wish it could instantaneously get you back to 15,000 base pairs, but it doesn't work that way. And it doesn't work that way because the body has control mechanisms that prevent it from working that way. The body is going to take its time to go about this process. But by taking the cycloelastogenol, you take this process that the body has, and every year you keep adding to the telomere length instead of subtracting from it. So this is what we're achieving, and you can see that here within this group of 97 people over a 12-month period.
Well, it's exciting that there's a human study and not just mice, not just genetically modified mice, and not just cells. So it's amazing that the research is really advancing here, and this seems to be a really significant result.
Yes, it's a big leap.
It really is.
50% of our genetics, but it's a big leap to get it, you know, the results in humans for sure.
Yes, this is what it's all about. You can learn a lot from mice, but there are differences between mice and humans, and so the more you can see what's actually happening within the body, the better. I like this result, and I also really like the individual human cell results, where you can actually see in a petri dish, yes, you put the cycloelastogenol in there, the cells are going to divide more. They're not going to stop at the normal Hayflick limit. I think those two things together really tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
So the loss of telomeres is not the only cause of aging. There are other causes of aging too, like DNA damage, for instance. And so there was a university in Israel that tried to determine how much of aging is telomere shortening. And this is kind of, there's no real answer to this question, but they tried to estimate it as best they could. And they did this by looking at different animals, because they were able to get data on different animals and how they aged and so on. And their conclusion was that roughly 33% of aging was due to telomere shortening. And I'm not standing here saying that that number is correct. I'm just saying that it gives you an idea that telomere shortening is a big hunk of the aging process. And there are other things out there, oxidative free radicals, other things that cause aging as well, but this is a major cause. And this is something that we can now do something very, very specific about.
Well, that's why I want to talk a little bit about the holistic approach that we've got, you know, at the Academy Healing Nutrition. Before we go into that, and before we go into the resource page that's up on the website that has some very, very interesting other sort of dimensions to this, I just want to mention to the folks out there that a word from your sponsor. We have an incredible April super sale happening. Essentially, Telostep works out normally to be $100 a month. Now, we have brought the price down from our competitors dramatically. You know, cycloestrogenol can range from $300 to $500 to $700 a month. And so our normal pricing is $100 a month when people sign up for the year. However, this April, we've got this very, very special deal for you to help you get started. For instance, if you get the 12-month supply in April, anytime in April you order it from us, you'll save $500. So that would actually only cost you $700 for the year. And if you email into us, it's just info@telostep.com. Anytime in April, and this special deal will finish at the end of April. It has to, because we've got very, very limited supplies. In fact, our supplies, hopefully they'll last through the April super sale, because if we run out of supplies, we won't be able to offer it. So it's technically first and first served. And so essentially, if you go for the 12-month supply this month, we'll give you the ability to just pay that off in 7 payments over 7 months. Now, that's a special offer to our webinar folks, because normally you would have to upfront that $700, but we're going to make it just a recurring payment over 7 months. Now, if you want to try the 6 months, you'll actually save $200 on a 6-month supply. All of this information is obviously up on our website. Now, on our website, we've got a resource page, and the life length people, and perhaps Rex can comment a little bit on this, to test the length of your telomeres. A few years ago, people were kind of trying to work it out, the best sort of system, and there was a few companies around who were sort of even offering saliva tests. But look, life length has become very much the best, well-organized company that will test your telomeres. So part of the April special is we're knocking off some serious money here, because you might want to get your telomeres tested, because it does cost a couple of $100. What happens is you get a kit sent to you, and you do have to get like a little blood sample done, and you put it back into the kit and you ship it off very, very fast. At the moment, that's only available, I think, to our American viewers. Sorry about that. But if you do get in touch with Life Length and you do live in another country, just email them. All the information's up on our resource page, and you can find out more information about that. So look, the real fun here is to get your telomeres tested as soon as possible, and then start taking the Telostep, and then in a year or two, get your telomeres tested again, so you can start to prove this to yourself, right? Now,
the advantage of the life length test is that most of the cheap telomere testing only tests your average telomere length. But what the life length people do is they test your average, and they also tell you the percentage of telomeres that are short, so that you can see this early increase that is more dramatic in the shorter telomeres. You can see that in the life length data.
And you also get a consultation with a medical doctor when you get your results back. So, often you get your results back from doctors and, blood testing, and you have no idea how to interpret. Well, you've got you've got part of this package that they offer you. You get good quality time with a doctor who will actually interpret the results for you. Now, we also have on our resource page mention of the Therify device. The Therify device is something that I've been actively involved in getting onto the marketplace. We've got a long, long history of electromagnetic healing in the Western world for the last 100 years, since Nikola Tesla. The Therify.tech, you can read up more about it. I personally think when you start to put all of these cutting-edge protocols together, like the longevity diet, herbs of longevity, the Telostep, and the Therify sessions, you've really, really got the most, dynamic protocols that are all accessible in terms of the economics for you to have a really strong, healthy, long, long life. And on the resource page, you'll see that we've made mention of Inga Bylinkina, who's right here. And Inga is actually our co-director and one of the faculty members, and teaches not only the longevity diet and the practical cooking side of it, but also the powerful Taoist Chinese herbs that have been around for centuries that really, really help to strengthen the body's constitution and its life force, and are famous for their longevity dynamics. Inga, can you just tell us a little bit of an overview of your work with counseling and nutritional counseling?
Sure. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak a little bit. And I've been working with Roger for about 10 years now. And how I got into this is actually taking the Academy of Healing Nutrition training course about 10 years ago. And then I stayed around and started working with Roger on the Academy, developing the curriculum, teaching a couple of modules within the Academy, and working with students very closely. And also I started coaching clients. Over years, I have coached a lot of clients, in particular in helping them to clean up their diet and to help them to tune into their internal intelligence, and also to get them to start using some of these really powerful tonic herbs, which in our times, there's a term that can be equated to tonic herbs that have been called as such in Chinese medicine. So the modern version of it is adaptogens. So this is becoming now quite popular, along with some other powerful natural substances like medicinal mushrooms. And we go really in depth into the tonic herbs or adaptogens and medicinal mushrooms in our curriculum. But it all really starts with the foundation of the diet. And whatever else you do with whatever other protocols for longevity, for natural healing you have set there, there's really so many of them these days. But nutrition is always the foundation, because if you think about where do we get our energy, right? Like we can look at it from that scientific perspective and look at how cells produce that energy and how genetics play into that. But from my perspective, as I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist, but I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I have an understanding that we get our energy for our daily activities from the food that we eat. So the quality of that food, the efficiency of our digestive system to break it down and to absorb it and to turn it into this usable energy is what is going to give us this kind of edge in longevity. So that's why we start with nutrition. And within Academy, we teach our students how to use food as medicine. So how to use food with its special signatures, with its special energetics. We look at different food groups, and we look at all food as medicine. So there is nothing on this planet that cannot be medicine. So for different purposes, we can use different foods, and not only to address symptoms, but also to enhance our ability to stay younger longer and maintain our energy longer. So I'm working mainly with our students, and also I see some clients who I help to make sure that they're eating the foods that are appropriate for their constitution type. So something that they're born with. And say when I was listening to this a presentation, which I was very excited to hear about, I only briefly spoke with Rex last year at the time when we were in San Diego at the longevity conference. And it was quite exciting to hear some of the news about the telomeres and the Telostep, and I was just new at that. But today I really listened deeply, and it's really interesting. I made some connections. I made some comparisons with what now science is coming up with and what the ancient Taoists in ancient China have been pursuing in terms of longevity and developing their consciousness. So in this sense, what I was very excited to hear is that the supplement that you are talking about today, Telostep, is made out of an herb. And this herb has been used for thousands of years in Chinese medicine tradition. So that really got me excited, because I'm not a fan of using a lot of supplements, which I know a lot of people resort to these days, because there are a lot of known nutritional deficiencies, and people try to plug in those gaps by taking supplements. And many of them are made from chemicals, or they're synthetically produced, and our body doesn't have the intelligence to recognize. So when I heard that this is made from astragalus root, that really got me excited, because I'm a real big fan of astragalus. And in Chinese medicine, it's called the Great Protector, interestingly. And it's associated with strengthening the immune system. So there is this interesting concept of the peripheral immune system, which has to do with protecting the skin layer, like the skin layer, creating this invisible sheath of support from external pathogens and bacteria and all the negative energies. So, and that kind of immune system is activated by astragalus. Also, astragalus is known to have an effect on our digestive system, and in particular on the meridian of stomach and spleen. And even though in Chinese medicine, the organs that are associated with meridians are not always having the same function as we know about from Western medicine, but this digestive function of the spleen, which is kind of producing the enzymes and being part of our immune system, is something that I can connect with what telomeres do, or what cycloestrogen from astragalus does. So I would actually like to know a little bit more about what made scientists discover astragalus and this specific molecule,
Yes.
and if there are any other molecules.
Yeah, I know the answer to that question. The reason why they tested the astragalus root and all the different molecules in it for candidates for activating the telomerase enzyme was because although the normal application for astragalus root in Chinese medicine, or the most common, is using it as a tea, they also did sometimes use it as an ingredient in a cream. They would make a cream out of it that they used as a salve for healing injuries. And so when people were going around trying to find, what could be a telomerase activator, they saw that, hey, look, this healing salve is made out of astragalus root. So maybe there's an ingredient in there that allows for cell division, that allows for regeneration. And so they put it on the list of things to test. That's how they originally identified it. Another interesting thing is that there is another variation of the cycloacegenol molecule that is called astragaloside 4. And it's called astragaloside 4 because it comes from the astragalus root. And astragaloside 4 is the second most active telomerase activator that's ever been found. And it is somewhere between 20 and 30 times less effective than cycloacegenol is. So it's like the same molecule with a little tweak to it. And that little tweak doesn't prevent it from working, but it makes it 20 to 30 times less effective. And that is the second most effective molecule that anyone has ever found for activating the telomerase enzyme. other than there was one molecule that someone came up with that is a synthetic molecule, but it's toxic. It's like completely toxic. It'll kill you. And it was effective as a telomerase activator, but that little detail. And again, that was a synthetic molecule. The next molecule down comes from mushrooms, but it is a lot less effective than astragaloside 4 is. But it still does have an effect that you can measure. And going way, way, way down on the list, omega-3. Omega-3 has a little tiny bit of telomerase activation, maybe because of some of those similarities I was talking about earlier between the molecules, but it's a small effect. So we're going in there and we're using.
It's interesting for us, Rex, because part of the Academy Healing Nutrition is we investigate cultures of longevity from all around the world. It's what we sort of put together for our students. And the common theme for the most successful cultures of longevity, of course, are high quality omega-3. That's very significant in the diet, you know, the Mediterranean diet, the Okinawan diet, etc. You know, and of course, omega-3 does so much more for you than just telomerase activation too. Yes, right. Yeah, we must point out though that they help to slow the wear and tear down omega-3, but it's not. Would you say it's a slight activator, or it's just it helps to reduce the wear and tear?
Well, it has its own effects, you know, anti-inflammation, all kinds of other things that omega-3 does. As far as it being a telomerase activator, it activates telomerase enough to measure, but it's a tiny, tiny, tiny little effect, you know. So you would have to take it for decades and decades and decades to get the same results. So it's just not practical from that point of view. But it does have a little bit of an effect. And but the cycloactigenol is just in a complete world of its own, which you can see from the astragaloside 4, because the astragaloside 4 is almost the same molecule. It's made in the same process in the same plant. It just has this little tiny tweak that makes it 20 to 30 times less effective.
So Inga, we might mention to our participants that if they want to start putting their questions into the chat window, just why we might keep chatting on, you know, certain things here, but if people have got questions, just start putting them into the chat window, and Inga will be able to read them out, and we're happy to, you know, get into any sort of questions about anything. So here's a question coming through from Martin.
Okay. All right, Roger, I got it. Okay, so the question from Martin, for those who are listening in, do we know why DNA has the flaw of shortening a telomerase?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Do we know why DNA has the flaw and shortening?
Has the flaw?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we actually do. There is everything that happens in the cell happens because of molecules. Specially designed, specially shaped molecules, enzymes and proteins. They're all coded for in the DNA, and these molecules come together and snap in place together to form complicated machinery within the cell. And one of those complicated machinery molecules is the molecule that copies our DNA, the photocopier. And it turns out that as part of the function of that molecule, it has to go down and to do the copying, it has to go down the DNA as if it were like a train track, right? And so it holds on to the molecule as it's going down the rail, so to speak. And where it holds on to the molecule, it can't copy that piece because it has to hold on to the molecule there. And so that's the 1-inch strip of the document that it can't get. It just has to do with the inherent mechanism itself.
You've got your train on the train track. You can't actually replace the track because your train is there doing all the work, but you can't replace it.
Exactly. You can't replace the track right under the train. You can do all the rest of it, but whatever's under the train, you can't get to. And that's exactly the problem that we have here. And that's why it always leaves a little bit off each time. And I should also point out that that's not the only mechanism of telomere shortening. If you have oxidative free radicals in your cell, those will destroy everything. And one of the things they can destroy is your telomeres. And so it's a good reason, when you were talking about diet, it's a good reason to have a good diet with antioxidants, because those will cut down on your oxidative free radicals and reduce the rate at which you lose your telomeres due to that mechanism.
Does the cycloestrogenol or the telomerase enzyme have any effect on inflammation in the body? Because inflammation is one of the reasons why we age, along with the free radical damage. So does it affect that level?
It indirectly does.
Straglocyte 4. Straglocyte 4 has antioxidant benefits. There's been serious studies there.
I would say that anything that astragaloside 4 does is also going to be done by cycloestrogenol, because they're almost the same molecule. But in addition to that, you get an indirect benefit in terms of inflammation, because you're reducing the number of senescent cells. And senescent cells, one of the biggest things they do to lead to aging problems is they produce signaling molecules that tell your body to get into an inflammation mode. And so if we can prevent there from being senescent cells or reduce their numbers, then we can reduce inflammation. And I mentioned one of the Maria Blasco mouse studies. She specifically saw that with cycloestrogenol, there was a remarkably lower level of senescent cells.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we have any other questions from our attendees? Thank you, Martin, for your question, by the way. So far, the folks are thinking about any questions.
Okay, well, that just means, so any sort of final kind of thoughts here, Rex, that you would like to present this evening?
I think we're entering into a very exciting time in terms of anti-aging. There is a concept that Aubrey de Grey came up with. He's a researcher in the anti-aging community. And his concept was of escape velocity. It's kind of like the idea that if a rocket ship goes at a certain speed, it can leave the Earth and go away forever. And his concept is that as new technologies and new approaches can be brought to bear to fight aging, we live for another day. In other words, it extends our life a little bit more, and that allows us to live long enough for the next development, and the next development, and the next development, so that we can continue to sort of ride this train out further and further because of each of these new developments. And this is possible because there's just so many exciting things happening in the research right now in terms of understanding all the nuances of how aging happens, and therefore how you might counter it.
Right. So we have a couple of questions. Do your telomeres deplete quickly after the Telostep is out of your system? So that is basically a question whether Telostep has cumulative properties or the telomeres go back to their normal programming once you stop Telostep.
Well, once you stop Telostep, what will happen is you're no longer making the telomerase enzyme, and so you're no longer going to add to your telomere length. And therefore, the normal processes of cell division and oxidative free radicals will steadily erode your telomeres. They will during this whole time, whether you take the cycloestrogenol or not. But when you're taking the cycloestrogenol, you have a net positive effect And then when you stop taking it, you'll have a net negative effect. But at least for as long as you took it, you had that increase that you put there into the telomeres. And your telomeres are not going to know whether they got there because you took cycloestragenol or not. And so they'll just erode at the normal rate, whichever ones you grew through the telomere.
Okay, then there is a very similar question, so I'll just skip that. And another question is, what if you just take astragalus root?
Well, as Rex said at the beginning of the presentation, that it takes I mean, what we're looking at here, folks, is just a single molecule extracted out of astragalus. And then we concentrate it into the Telostep with a very, very good delivery system to get it right down into your DNA. Now, that's why it's a little bit costly, because you know, there's quite an extraction process here. So quite frankly, you can't take astragalus and get the benefits of cycloestragenol. You can take astragalus and get the benefits of what we know in Chinese medicine. It's a major immune enhancer, and it's good for the yang of the body and all sorts of dynamics, but you won't be getting that direct input of the cycloestragenol molecule. So that's why we've got the Telostep. Would you like to comment on that, Rex?
No, you put it quite nicely.
Another question is, what is the longest term a person has been on a regimen of cycloestragenol and who has been examined? Is there a time limit to taking it?
Good question. I don't think anybody who's been studied that way as an individual, is there, Rex?
Well, humans started taking cycloestragenol in 2005. And so we've had 12 years of humans taking cycloestragenol. And interestingly enough, some of the old timers in taking this, a lot of them were doctors who originally started taking it. So they have measured their telomeres the whole time. And they tell stories of them continuing to see telomere increase, you know, years into it, and continuing to have health benefits associated with it. It doesn't stop the aging process because you still have the other causes of aging going on in your body. But for those areas where it has the biggest impact, they continue to see improvement sometimes 12 years down the road. So there doesn't seem to be a stopping process. You can stop at any time and you will have been better off for having taken it. But because the whole process is slow, there continues to be a benefit to continue to take it, even 12 years later, according to the people these doctors who were some of the early participants.
In what region is, the question says, Telostep grown, processed, and manufactured? So I'm assuming this is referring to the astragalus root that becomes cycloestragenol and then Telostep.
The astragalus root is grown in a lot of different areas of China and Mongolia as well. Where we specifically get it is from China. It's harvested there and it's processed into the cycloestragenol there because that's the most cost-effective place to produce it. But we actually make the Telostep here in the United States. That's done here in the US, and I should also point out that we test for the content of the cycloestragenol and also to make sure there aren't nasty things like pathogens or heavy metals or things like that. We do all those tests twice. We do those tests to the raw ingredient in China, and then we do all those tests with the independent lab here in the United States.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that, you know, the Chinese in terms of food technology are probably the best in the world. You know, they've got the state-of-the-art equipment. And also, astragalus is sustainable growing in China, provides a lot of jobs to people. They're really good at doing it. They've been doing it for, you know, centuries. And, you know, they use other aspects of the plant when they process cycloestragenol. So, and as Rex says, you know, we've got very good high quality control. It's tested in China before it comes here. and then we test it again, and it's 98% pure, which is the top mark that you can get in food purity.
This is a very, very good point, actually. I'm glad this came up. It's very critical to process to 98% purity as we do, because we're concentrating this, 10,000 times or so. And when you do that, you don't want to accidentally concentrate something negative 10,000 times. For instance, broccoli and astragalus root both have high concentrations of iron. And when you eat that in broccoli, it's a good thing because it gives you the iron your body needs. But if you were to take broccoli and concentrate the iron 10,000 times, you would get iron poisoning from eating that much iron.
Right.
And so we don't want to have something coming along for the ride. And that's why we purify the cycloostrogeniol to 98%. And I have seen some other people who have been purifying it to 85% or 50%. Just the other day, I saw one manufacturer that was only purifying to 5%, which I think is a very dangerous thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you can have all kinds of things coming along for the ride in something like that. But you have to make sure that it's purified to a high degree before it's put into the product.
That's what I have noticed about some of the competitors. There's not many competitors out there, but their purity level is questionable. Plus their delivery system. I mean, one of the unique things about Telostep is its delivery system, including the formula helps to spread it out in the intestines, so more of it gets into the blood system as well, of course, bypassing the gastric acid.
That's a very good point, is that some people who are selling cycloestrogenol just have it cycloestrogenol, and then you get this big clump that the body can't digest, break down, and utilize. We deposit our cycloestrogenol on a vegetable substrate. And the reason why we do that, it's a highly dissolvable substrate, so that the individual molecules when in the intestine are immediately released into the water, essentially in the intestine, so that they can move into the body as individual molecules where they can go into the cells and actually be used.
Precisely, yeah.
Great. Well, Roger, I have a question for you, actually.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can you describe the ordering process and if there is any payment plan?
Yeah.
That's for Sherry, I think.
Sure. Okay. Well, look, bottom line, I'll just, the email for us is info@telostep.com. Perhaps, Inga, you could type that into the chat window there just for clarity. Now, we have this 1-year special deal only available in April. Now, up on the website, we don't actually have the pay over 7 months actually activated on our website. You're actually on the website. What we have got is if you want to pay the $700 up front for the year's supply, remember you save $500, right? So, but what we're offering you is the ability to just pay $100 a month over the next 7 months, recurring payment plan, and we'll deliver you your 12-month supply we'll ship the whole lot out, so it's done on a trust basis here. And all you have to do is email us. Remember that this, it might sound like that typical sales pitch that supplies are limited, but they really are, because I'm actually looking at the boxes that we've got here, and it's a limited supply for April for this special deal. So we're very friendly here in the office. Just email us, say, hey, I'm interested in the recurring plan, and look, we'll just set it up with you. We'll take your details, and we'll get it started over the next week. So email, anytime over the next week, and I'm sure you'll probably get your supplies for the rest of the year with this deal. And we will have to set up the recurring payment plan through our PayPal account. So we'll just handle all of that for you. You don't have to worry about it. We'll just get your credit card details and set it up for you. Otherwise, if you just want the 6 months, you can go into the website under purchase and get 6 months, save $200, and we'll ship it out to you. But I really highly suggest, folks, that you get into this, you know, with the 12-month plan. You're saving a lot of money. You could get your, go to life length and get your telomeres measured as part of this deal. You know, you save a lot of money here. So as I say, we're celebrating the whole release of this. Even though we've had the Telostep, Rex and I, we've been experimenting with it for many years. And that's where the testimonials have actually come from on our website, by the way. They are from people, helpful people who have been involved with this project right from the start, so helping and supporting it and actually taking the Telostep product over many years. So it has taken quite some time to get to this point. Some serious research and development is taking place here.
Well, and also here we are our own human guinea pigs.
Isn't that fun?
For a while ourselves, and I'm always the proponent of living by example. Practice what you preach, right? So the diet and the herbal component, everything is something that we've been implementing in our own lives. And I've seen amazing results with diets supplemented with herbs personally. And I had a journey through Lyme disease, which I did completely naturally without any medication, without any medical intervention. So we are basically taking the cycloestrogenol ourselves, and we'll keep you updated how it goes in a year or two, and you'll see us all young and rejuvenated, hopefully. So it's exciting what modern science is getting into. And I'm personally also curious to see other herbs being researched for similar molecules and similar effects on our DNA.
Inga, I just opened up
That's a very good point.
And there's a little question there about getting it shipped to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So just to let folks know, this month I've been shipping it to New Zealand, Australia. We did ship some to Canada. There's no problem. It's not a hormone. It's not a pharmaceutical. It's a food supplement. Basically, it's the same as like shipping you a vitamin. And because technically speaking, you've only paid $100 for it. When we ship you the whole lot, we just put $100 on our customs form. So you're not going to have any trouble in Canada getting the shipment through to you. It's just a food supplement.
Great. So I think we are done with questions here. So any final thoughts, Roger, Rex? And I think we can close the webinar shortly.
Well, I'd like to just thank Rex. As I've mentioned, Rex has been my mentor, and I've learned so much from Rex. And it's I got involved with the whole Telostep project. He's my business partner in this, and it's an incredible learning journey. As I mentioned before, I've been involved with natural healing and the longevity diet for 30 years, and it's always been an East-West theme. And I'm just excited about the Western nutritional theory. It's kind of in a way catching up with the Eastern traditions about longevity, but this is a really, really exciting. I actually don't get involved with other supplements. We don't sell supplements at the school. We just show people how to cook and what to make for breakfast and superfood drinks and how to do the cooking with Chinese herbs. So we're very, very grounded and practical here. So we actually don't sell any other supplements, but we do, promote a lot of the medicinal mushrooms and some of the Chinese herbs and all of that. So this is the first time I've actually got involved with a supplement, because I'm just so incredibly excited about it. I have been taking it myself for the last couple of years. People ask me, do I notice any difference? Well, I don't know, because I'm actually pretty healthy, and I do actually take Chinese herbs, these tonic herbs, and I have a pretty good diet and so forth. So I actually haven't noticed anything, radically different, unlike some other people who have started to take Telostep. and they get like they go, wow, I'm sleeping better, I'm feeling better, I've got more energy and so forth. However, in my opinion, when you start to get into the research and the science around this, you'd actually have to be absolutely crazy not to take it. That's the way I think about this. You have to be insane not to take it, with all the incredible science. So that's my last word here. I hope we have inspired you tonight. I hope you've given you some good information, a good focus. Do your own research. By the way, we've got some great pages that you can explore up on the website. It's all well documented there. And there's a couple of good books that have come out that you'll find on the resource page. I do suggest you follow that up as well, and you'll see a lot of other validations around this very, very exciting product. So remember, April sale, happy to serve you. Thank you very much, Rex. Thank you very much, Inga. I don't think do we have any other questions, Inga?
We don't have any questions, just a couple of thank yous and a couple of positive comments. Sean is saying hello, saying thank you for the opportunity to learn about the subject. It's been coming into his awareness for a while now, so now he's taking this as a sign to get on with it. So much appreciated. So a couple of really nice comments. This is amazing. Thanks for all the beautiful people who will contribute so much more creativity and bliss to community, also with the longer and healthier life, which is a good point, that there's a lot of brain potential and creativity potential in nowadays and age. And if we can prolong the life of these brilliant thinkers, so it will be better for the whole of humanity.
Good point. I'd like to just mention one more thing. This is dedicated to my mother. The reason why I got involved with this was because of my mother. She's 89. She's doing really, really well. She follows some aspects of the longevity diet, over the last 20, 30 years. So she hasn't had any major medical problems, except the general wear and tear of, life and aging. And that was my initial incentive to get involved. And now my mother is taking this, and I haven't had her telomeres measured. She doesn't want to do that, but so if you do have some elderly folks that you'd love dearly, you never know. This could extend their life, a little bit more for you to have. It's just the joy of having our ancestors around, So I think we should say good night. So it's good night from New York. Rex is down in Florida there, so good night from Florida. And thank you very much, Inga, for helping us. So thanks, everybody, and do keep in touch. Send us an email, and we'll get some Telostep shipped out to you this month. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Rex. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, everyone who came into the webinar tonight. See you later.